evening and welcome to the 542nd episode of Travelage Radio. I'm Dan Schlossberg, along with my guest co-host Arnell Kendall, making her Major League debut tonight. And we are the 13th season of Travelage Radio, the show that lets you enjoy the pleasures of travel from the comfort of your armchair.
Every week at this time, we talk to people representing destinations, hotels, airlines, railroads, car rentals, companies, and others in the world of travel and hospitality, from authors and bloggers to broadcasters and publicists. It's got anything to do with travel. It's got everything to do with the Travel Itch Radio.
And our guest tonight is my friend Shoshana Wasserman of the First Americans Museum in Oklahoma City. Welcome to Travelage Radio, Shoshana.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be back.
When did the First Americans Museum open, and why is it located in Oklahoma City?
Well, the First Americans Museum has been a project in the making for 3 decades. So this has been a really well thought out, long, process. But we opened in September of 2021, right after COVID. So very interesting, in fact, it was still during COVID. And this museum shares the collective story of the 39 tribes that are now in what we know today as Oklahoma. Of course, this was at one time deemed Indian Territory. Most of the 39 tribes that are here today were not original inhabitants from here. Our tribes were from all over the what became known as the United States. And so this is really a national story through a regional lens. This is America's history because, the Modocs came from California, the Lenape from up in the Northeast, Seminoles from the Southeast. So this really is, quite a national story of this country.
Each of the tribes is different culturally and even linguistically. Would you say they're as diverse as the nations on the continent of Europe?
Absolutely. When you think about woodlands cultures and plains cultures and, think about our United States today and how vastly different just the country is. Well, you have that magnified because our tribes were living, very independently at one time. And so, with 12 different linguistic families, that would be like going to Europe and trying to build a museum that featured all of the different cultures across Europe. When I share it in that way, people can really kind of wrap their head around it.
Well, as you mentioned, I guess it's true that only a few tribal nations are indigenous to the state of Oklahoma, and the rest were removed from their original homelands, right?
That's correct. So the Apache, Caddo, Tonkawa, and Wichita and affiliated tribes have always inhabited this part of the country, whether it was migrating through or whether they were original inhabitants, but even some of them. So for example, the Wichita and affiliated tribes, they have always resided in this part of the country, but many people may know the city called Waco, Texas. Well, they were actually removed from this part of the country down to that area. And that's where Waco, the Wichita, one of the original names for the Wichita people is Waco. So now you can see that even for the ones that were always from here, they too had stories of journey and stories of, removal. So it wasn't just the tribes being forcefully removed from other places into Indian Territory, but also some of those that were here were also moved out and then, of course, moved back in at a later time.
So we've got to mention the Trail of Tears. I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, I like to share with people because we all grow up and we hear about this Trail of Tears and we think of the Trail of Tears, and most people are most familiar with the Cherokee Trail of Tears. And we think of this as a very singular, monolithic kind of event. It is not at all. So I'm just going to use myself as an example. So I'm from Tlatelolco Tribal Town. It is one of the tribal towns that makes up the Muskogee Confederacy. Muskogee Nation Confederacy was made up of all of these different tribal towns, many of these tribal towns throughout Alabama, Georgia. And so specifically Tlaxcala, we had two different removal routes, one to the north, one to the south, until we were reestablished here in Indian Territory. So if you think of that times 39 tribes, you can see that there are many, many stories and many sort of trails of journey. And those journeys are very different. You know, we tend to think of the Trail of Tears as walking through snow, and for many, you know, we were forced to march about 10 miles a day by the U.S. military. But others came on boat, cattle cars. So there's a lot of diversity, even in our story of journey to what is now Oklahoma, the 46th state.
And the Choctaw people actually call the land Oklahoma. And doesn't that mean red people in their language?
Yeah, so the name of our state actually originated from those two Choctaw words, Oklahoma, which translates to red people. So people always find that fascinating.
And by the way, I love your earrings. Can you show them? Just move your hair a little bit and show them to our viewers.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Beautiful. And this is exactly what we, you know, one of the things, so we have a number of galleries in the, you know, we're a 175,000 square foot museum on 40 acres. We're the anchor destination in the middle of a much, much larger 300 acres site. And so we have all of these exhibit galleries, we have live programming, and of course we have the culinary arts. So you can't experience a culture unless you get to taste the culinary traditions of a culture. And then we have a fam store, and these earrings that you see here, this is a perfect example of what you would find in our fam store. We support authentic Native American artists. So many of our artists were leaving the state of Oklahoma to go make a living in other places like the Idle-Jord, like Santa Fe, Portland Art Market. And so we've created and cultivated a thriving arts marketplace to keep our artisans here.
And we're talking with Shoshana Wasserman of First Americans Museum.
So, Shoshana, when did Oklahoma become a state, and how did they change the life of the tribes who lived there?
Traumatically and dramatically. 1907, we become a state. And for anybody who is familiar with history, from 1830 to 1907, Andrew Jackson has a series of federal policies that dramatically change all of our lives. This forced assimilation, termination, we are prisoners of war. So this is our most tragic period in our history, where we are living freely all over, the country. And then over the period of about 75 years, one by one, each of the tribes are then moved into Indian Territory. And then, of course, in 1907, we become the 46th state of Oklahoma.
Right. So, do you consider Oklahoma the crossroads of America?
Yeah, we do. We have interstates I-40 and I-35, and 235. So we're a major thoroughfare for the, entire country. We sit right along the Oklahoma River. It used to be known as the North Canadian River, and it is in most sections. But where we sit, it has been renamed the Oklahoma River. It's it is a Olympic rowing venue. So it's a very activated space, and we look forward to the time where we can perhaps bring some of our rowing and canoeing traditions to the riverfront, because we sit right here along the river. Many of our communities were always built by riverways because we had incredible trade routes. And so we were, centers of commerce and culture and trade since time immemorial.
That's fascinating. And, it's actually funny because I've learned a lot about this through my daughter. She's in AP history. So I've learned a lot about this, which is incredible. So when you're talking about it, I love it because
I'm delighted to know she's learning about it.
Yeah. Oh, very much. Oh, very much so. It's very big. So is that area, is that their territory? Is that territory for the tribes? Is that the tribes' territory that you talked about on the river?
I think I
Yeah,
understand
sorry.
what you're saying. So originally, you would have found Wichita encampments all up and down this, this riverway. Then we go through the industrial period. Then, the Wichita are removed themselves down to the southern, what becomes later the southern Texas area. Then they wind up, back here. Then
Yeah.
you've got all 39 tribes that are here today that are now coming in different waves. So this is a very transactional period of time. It is a very difficult period of time, quite frankly, because we're removed from our homelands. We're removed from all of the knowledge base that we have with flora and fauna and our medicine, survival. Everything changes for us. We're uprooted and we are removed. And yet we are some of the most tenacious, persistent, amazing peoples. And so then we wind up in Indian territory and, begin to reestablish ourselves and reestablish new homelands.
Right. So do the tribes prefer to be called Indians or Native Americans?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and there is no good answer. If you were to ask me, what would I prefer to be called? In our language, we call ourselves Muskogee. That's how we refer to ourselves in our language, but that's not going to be easy for everyone to do, times 528 tribes, right?
Right.
But it's very generational. My mother's era, they grew up, they called themselves Indians. That's what they, that's what was the norm at the time. And then as we become educated, we realize Indians is a misnomer. It's actually an accident. And then American Indian becomes the next terminology that, becomes embraced. But that, again, is not correct. So then that evolves into Native America. But then we have a lot of different generations of people from many different cultures all over the world born to America, and they too believe themselves to be native to America. So that becomes complicated. So long and short is there is not one good, quick, easy answer. We made a decision right before opening in 2021 to rename the museum First Americans Museum. Now, why did we do that? Because we know this as the Americas now, right? And we were the first peoples of this continent. So it's not about citizenship. It is about being the first peoples of this continent. So for us in this moment, and we're seeing this warmly embraced, but I'll be honest with you, the younger generations, they like to use the term indigenous or natives. So you'll never find just one term that is really going to, be fully represented.
Right. So what tribes would you find the people in Oklahoma? And I mean, we hear that there are Apaches were one of them. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. We have
Right.
39 distinct nations. So I couldn't, you don't want
That's
me to
amazing.
run through the
39.
list. And
Wow.
what you also have to understand is out of those 39 nations,
Yeah.
oftentimes two separate nations were joined together to create one identity. So, for example, the Cheyenne and Arapaho, they have they have connectivity, but they have different cultural lifeways, different languages. And yet once they are here, they are joined together as one tribe. The Oto and Missouri tribes, you
Right.
find the same thing. So even in the 39, it is a very complicated history.
It's fascinating, really, at the end of the day, I know originally where I was from, originally in South Africa, there were also different tribes. So listening to what you're saying, it's really it's very interesting, I have to say. So tell me, Shoshana, the museum's website lists the museum's core values as respect, reciprocity, relationships, and responsibility. Can you please explain to our audience?
Yeah, I mean, these are human values. They're not unique to us, but there are certainly unique ways of expressing these things in our cultures. And
Yeah.
so we just felt like that it was very important to be value based. This is a time when all of us could, enjoy a return to values that connect us all. And so that is our intention. I think one of the most interesting things, it's very timely right now. We see films like Killers of the Flower Moon. We see Reservation Dogs. We see this is a big moment in media for Native peoples right now. And I think one thing to kind of note from that is all of those are different tribes. Well, when you come to First Americans Museum, that the Killers of the Flower Moon, which is about the reign of terror with the Osage people, it is a particular moment in time in their history. That's just one small story, one microcosm. We have thousands and thousands of other stories times 39 nations, that we are sharing and explaining and exploring with our visitors. So you can come back to the museum over and over again. There are lots of very media rich experiences. So we have two different galleries right now. We have the Oklahoma exhibit, which shares the collective story of the 39 tribes, past, present, and future. And it's very media rich, very story rich. And the most important thing to understand about the experience you'll get here at First Americans Museum is everything is in first person. It is us narrating and telling our own stories in our own voice. Then if you go upstairs to the Tribal Nations Gallery, we have the Winneco exhibit. This exhibit is really unique. We have an agreement with the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian. Many of these cultural materials were collected in Indian Territory during the turn of the century. This is a 10-year loan. And so here you have the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, who has this amazing collection of items collected here. And oftentimes they have lots of information about, there were actually very good collection records kept at that time by the collectors. However, there's still so much not known about those materials. And here we are in close proximity to all of those tribes. Well, guess what happens when we're working on this loan? We begin to see names that we recognize and we go, wow, I recognize that name. And then we begin to see cultural materials and we say, wait a minute, that was my great grandfather's. And there's a story in our family about when that item was, collected by the collectors. So now you've got this incredible wealth of knowledge that is meeting up with this collection that the Smithsonian has. And then what we did is, as we brought these cultural materials to the museum, we facilitated these reunions. So now if you can imagine, you have the descendants of the original maker of that cultural material standing in a room holding and touching the DNA of their relatives who made this incredible, cultural material. And this item has gone on a journey of its own, from here oftentimes to Penn State, then to New York, where the museum was originally located, and then finally to Suitland, Maryland, outside of DC. So it's such an incredible, series of exhibitions. And that's just one small part of what we do, because we're really a living museum. We have all these living cultures. I mean, I myself, I'm from the Muskogee Nation, and we still have all of our stickball games. We still have all of our ceremonies, all of these things that we do in community. And so oftentimes we're inviting these tribal communities to come to the museum and share those things in this space, or we're partnering with the tribes to create new events like Tech Fest, which is based on STEAM and traditional and ecological knowledge, but we're working with all of the tribes to uplift this very new concept of science and engineering, which has been part of our cultures since time immemorial.
That is so fascinating, filled with so much art and culture and the people of the tribes and the history. It really is unbelievable. You know, we're talking with Shoshana Wasserman, our first American museum.
Shoshana, a quick, short and sweet question and answer. Is the museum open all year and every day of the year?
The museum is open year round. We are closed one day a week on Tuesdays. And this time next year, this will be a whole different ball game out here, because right now adjacent to us is the Okana Indoor Resort and Water Park, the largest water park in the region, that's being built by one of the tribes. So we are going to be welcoming families. And so our next project is to open our Family Discovery Center. And that will be the next phase of the museum. We opened everything in September 2021, and now we're looking forward to opening the Family Discovery Center in conjunction with this unbelievable destination with 11, 12 retail opportunities out here, restaurants, stores. I mean, it's just going to be really a place where you can travel to and stay 3 or 4 days.
And do you have guided tours led by Native American docents?
We have guided tours. Some of our docents are Native, some are not. And so these are wonderful opportunities. Every day at 1:00, we have a docent-led tour. And we also have groups who book tours with our cultural ambassadors. Now, the cultural ambassadors are all Native. So yeah, we offer a wide variety of different kinds of experiences.
And how about movies, concerts, or special events?
All of it.
All of the above, right?
All of the above. We're getting ready to do a presentation for just our members, which is going to be a collaboration with the Oklahoma City Ballet. And we'll be doing a wonderful ballet called When Spider Meets Fire. And then we'll be doing another one that features the Five Moons ballerinas. We also are going to be featuring in that same concert Jared Tate, who is a Chickasaw composer and just Chickasaw, and USA ambassador. And so, yes, we just have the calendar is full all the time. So it's really important to go on our social media, on our website, famok.org, and, stay up to date, because this isn't just a museum with things in cases. Mm-hmm. This is a living museum with cultures that are evolving. We're getting ready for IPX, which is kind of like an indigenous pop culture, event that's going to take place over 3 days. We'll have our summer solstice celebration. So there's always something going on here.
And you mentioned Indian cuisine. You can taste it at the museum. The only thing I know is fry bread. What else?
Yeah, and fry bread is, what we do is we focus on indigenous ingredients, the ingredients that have always been a part of this continent and have been part of our food and cultural lifeways. And we take those ingredients and we pair that with kind of modern cuisine. So you are really looking at just incredible dishes. We have Chef Loretta Barrett Oden, who is a citizen Potawatomi chef. She's an Emmy Award-winning chef, and she is the one that curates all of the food and culinary, delights.
It sounds good. And I want to tell our viewers, you're tuned to Travelers Radio, now in our 13th season, with Dan Schlossberg, sometimes Roger Noriega, tonight Arnell Kendall. Check us out on iTunes, LinkedIn, and Instagram, or the Travelers Radio Facebook page, among other places. And we're talking with Shoshana Wasserman of First Americans Museum.
So, Shoshana, are there Native American restaurants or hotels in the city that people
Not really.
No?
We're very, very unique.
Okay.
You just are not going to find Native cuisine throughout the state. It's becoming more popular across the nation in some different pockets, but we're really one of a kind.
Okay, that's good to know. And how much time should the visitors allow to experienced the first Americans Museum, do you
You
think?
know, that really depends on the visitor. You know, it could be anywhere from 1 hour to we've had bus tours that have literally had to come through in an hour. You can't see everything.
Right.
And then we've had the more common is 2 or 3 hours. A lot of people will come, they'll see one of the galleries in the morning, they'll go to lunch, then they'll go see the other gallery. We have this beautiful walk up to the top of the Fam Mound, which is an outdoor experience. We have a beautiful courtyard experience. So it just depends on how you want to experience, the museum. I'm sure when our hotel guests are staying right here, they will probably come over and stay the whole day.
Right. Okay. So, and then what are the demographics? And especially, I would like to know whether most of the clientele consists of the curious Caucasians or whether it's minorities, and especially the Native Americans also come to the museum.
Yeah, well, museum goers in most museums are usually non-native, older, people with discretionary time and income. And
Yeah.
so we certainly match that profile, but we have such invigorating and exciting programming that we're trying to do all the time, that we're really trying to see that next generation
Yes.
of museum aficionados. And sometimes people think of this term museum and they think of it as being stuffy and just looking at things. We're very different. Our Family Discovery Center that's getting ready to come online. It's about the whole family coming into an experiential space, getting your hands on stuff, doing things, still doing that same kind of learning. And, it's more, I guess you would say, edutainment. So we also, have just today, I was downstairs and I met with a group of Oto Missouri tribal elders. Last week, a group of Seneca Cayuga elders. So we do have participation from the tribes coming, but I would say primarily, the non-native audience is our customers, and sort of the native audiences are our constituents.
Right. Okay. It's fascinating. And I'm hoping the younger generation, learning about this so much in their history at school, that they will have interest to come to the museum.
Well, actually, they're not learning about it in school, and that's the problem. So museums around the country are filling that void because so often we, as the original peoples of this continent, are invisible and we are missing from the history books. So that's a real responsibility for us, is to make sure that these stories from a first person perspective are being shared so that it becomes part of the national consciousness and the national narrative, because we can often, be forgotten.
Yes. Well, talking about that and trying to get so many more guests to come and visit at the museum, how many guests do you get per year coming? And what is your season? What is your peak season?
Oh, I would say, January and February for anybody is kind of the lower season because we certainly are a seasonal climate. We have all 4 seasons here, but we're not like Arizona where, summers are quite as miserable. But so we are year round. And, to date, since we've opened, we've had about 300,000 visitors from all states, 38 different countries. So, we're
that's good. Yeah.
We're just seeing tremendous, visitation.
Yeah, fantastic. Because I was going to ask you, how much does the museum draw of foreign countries?
Yeah.
And do you offer guided tours in languages other than English?
We do not.
Okay.
We do not at this time. I hope, keep in mind, we're only 3 years old. So,
You're babies.
We're babies. We're a new institution. There's lots of room for growth. But I think you're going to see in 2026, That's the anniversary of Route 66. So we're all preparing for that moment. We're getting ready for the World Cup. We're getting ready for the 250th anniversary, the quinticentennial of America. So all of these things are really going to seed and stimulate international visitors who, of course, spend much more time at a destination. So we love that. And we're like an orientation experience. We share the collective story of the 39 tribes. And then what we hope is that a visitor will be so fascinated and so intrigued that then they might want to stay, and they might want to go to the Chickasaw Cultural Center or the Cherokee Heritage Center, or to the Philbrook, Museum in Tulsa. So, there are lots of opportunities to hub and spoke out now with this new hotel, 404 room indoor, water park and resort. It will be equipped to be able to handle small 300, 400 size conferences as well. So this time next year, you're going to want to come here.
Yes, I'm coming.
Come on.
I'd love to. I think it's fantastic because I think, you're giving back to those communities, and it's so meaningful, and you're supporting the community. And I think today that's really important. People like that. It's become a new thing, and especially with tourism, you'll get a lot of support. Talking about that, how do guests get there, and do visitors come by car or do they fly? And how close are you to the Oklahoma City's Will Rogers Airport?
Yeah, so we're really, we're right in the center of the state in Oklahoma.
Right.
Oklahoma City is the capital. We're right off both major interstates.
Right.
We're 20 minutes from the airport, hotels all around, not only on site as of next year, but all over Bricktown and downtown. So the Bricktown Entertainment District is right here, the boathouse, the riverfront. So there is so much connectivity that it's, we're really seeing visitation, fly-ins, and then by car.
Fantastic. Okay.
That's and don't forget, we're 3 hours from Dallas. We're 3 hours from, Bentonville is now such an incredible hub. And so a lot of tour groups are going to Bentonville, and then Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and Dallas, or, vice versa. We're close. Yeah. We're 4 hours from Amarillo, 5 hours from Kansas City, 3 hours from Wichita. So we're really in a very centralized area. And I think what is important is, the first time international visitors, they're still going to either coast, right? That's what they do. Right. But where we really come into play is for that visitor who has done that, and now they're looking for that niche American experience. They're very interested in Route 66, our international visitors. They're interested in Western heritage. We have a joint ticket with the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. So and then they're interested in First Americans cultures. So we're really filling that Americana, kind of niche that I think people are looking for those very authentic kinds of experiences once they do the coast.
100% authentic. That's what it is. Yeah, absolutely. We're talking with Shoshana Wasserman, our First Americans Museum.
Shoshana, when you mentioned that you have a deal with the Cowboy Museum, thought came to mind, cowboys and Indians?
Oh, yeah. We've heard it before.
I'm sure you have.
And all of Europe, especially German-speaking Europe, because of Karl May and the many books he wrote, romanticizing and fantasizing about, Native Americans when he had never even, seen them. But what it did is it became like, if you will, kind of the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys of their culture. And so it created these really, incredibly interested groups of people in Western and First Americans cultures. And so that's who we really are seeing from German-speaking Europe, and it is really because of Karl May. So, there's such a incredible, in fact, if you go across Germany, you will find all of these hobbyist powwows and hobbyist culture clubs. In a previous life, I had a Native American dance company. We would often travel through German-speaking Europe, and we would be invited to, for cultural exchange at these kinds of events. And it's amazing because oftentimes the European audience is far more educated about Native cultures than even our people in our own country. So it's a fascination, and so we're really meeting the needs. But what I love about it is we're taking people from what they think they know about Native peoples to perhaps what they might not have realized, about our First American cultures.
Okay, you've answered a whole bunch of these things, but I still want to ask, other First American attractions in Oklahoma that visitors can explore, and things like Bricktown. I mean, I've been to Oklahoma City. I've seen this, but I wasn't there since your museum opened. But Bricktown, Mickey Mantle came from Commerce, Oklahoma. There's a AAA baseball stadium and quite a baseball heritage there, too.
Yeah. Well, yes, there are a lot of other. So first of all, many of the tribes have their own tribal museums. And the difference between us and them is, so for example, the Muskogee Creek Nation, we would be doing a deep dive into our own history, maybe in our original homeland. And then once we arrive here in Indian Territory, that is not what First Americans Museum does. First Americans Museum gives you a collective understanding of the common experiences and differences amongst all 39 nations. But we're kind of like a great orientation. And then once somebody kind of understands the landscape of Indian Territory and now today Oklahoma, then a lot of our visitors book trips to go to some of these tribal museums. I mentioned Killers of the Flower Moon. That's top of mind for everybody right now with the Osage Nation. The Osage Museum is one of the oldest museums in the nation. So there are wonderful things like that. And then so many of our sort of contemporary museums have significant Native collections. We have the Sam Noble Natural History Museum, 17 miles from here. We have the Philbrook, the Gilcrease. Gilcrease has one of the most incredible collections, and Thomas Gilcrease was a Muskogee Creek. So there are so many different opportunities to experience Native culture in the state of Oklahoma. There's probably not any given weekend that you can't find something going on across the state to participate in.
Well, I've got to throw in this red herring of a question. Oklahoma was made famous by Will Rogers, and of course, Rogers and Hammerstein, the show Oklahoma. But you also have the National Severe Storms Forecast Center, and I know that you have a reputation for some wild weather. So do you have tornado shelters in the museum?
We do.
Okay, that's it, right?
That's
You haven't used them yet. Right?
We are in the heart of the wild weather, where the northern flow and the southern flow collide, and that's just part of our landscape here.
Okay, we're talking with Shoshana Wasserman of First Americans Museum.
So our audience always like to know more about our guests. So please share where you were born, raised, and schooled, and how you got into the travel hospitality business, and especially how you came to the First Americans Museum.
Yeah, well, I'm delighted to share that. I am a product of two tribal peoples. Obviously, my name's Shoshana Wasserman. My dad's side of the family escaped Poland and were immigrants to this country during the time of the Holocaust. And, so that side of my family has its own, amazing story. And then, of course, on my mother's side, I'm Muskogee Creek, specifically from Thwacko Tribal Town. I am Turtle Clan. And these clan systems are the way our tribal communities are organized, and it helps us understand our roles and responsibilities within our cultures. And then my undergraduate degree is in education. So I was always very interested in multicultural education. I worked for Oklahoma Children's Theater and Oklahoma Contemporary in the contemporary arts field. I had a Native American dance company for 12 years, and we traveled all over the world. Actually, at the time, that's really what got me interested in this project at the time, was because we were oftentimes traveling with the state of Oklahoma or the United States, and we were trying to generate interest in tourism to the U.S. and specifically to Oklahoma or this region. But it was very difficult for visitors to navigate and experience. And what was needed was a centralized experience that could share the collective story of the 39 tribes that are here today in a manageable way, and then give the opportunity and help make the connections between how they could do a deeper dive with, the tribal nations that are here in this state today. So that's really how I came to be in this role. I've been with the museum for 19 years. From the time when it was, we're on a brownfield site. This is one of the largest producing oil fields in all of the United States. It was called Oklahoma City Oil Field Number 1, 57 producing oil wells at one time. And so when I came on with the museum, we had not begun to do anything yet. I came on in 2005, and we had a ground blessing ceremony on November 1st of 2005. And then, we began to do site remediation with many partners and clean up the brownfield site. And then in 2012, we took a brief pause. And then resumed, and of course, then the pandemic. So, lots of challenges through the years that, are very similar to our cultural histories. And so it is, I'm sure, by no coincidence that this museum came to fruition with many obstacles and challenges, and yet the leadership of this, museum, the board of directors, the many, many hands who have touched it, never fell short of, striving for that world-class destination. And so today we are living that moment, and we're just very grateful to all of them.
That's great. That's really great. So on that note, no, really, it's fabulous. I'm very happy for you and for your members and your board. I think you've done an incredible job, and I hope to come and visit.
I hope you will.
Yes.
Be sure and let me know if you're coming to town.
Absolutely, Shoshana. And just one more thing. Is there anything that you would like to say or address before we sign off? Anything else you want to add for our?
I think the museum is a very welcoming space.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can see museums like this as for them. That is not the case at all. Part of the reason we changed the name to First Americans Museum, the acronym is family. We want everybody to feel like they're part of the family. So it's a very welcoming space. There are no stupid questions. We get lots of people with lots of different ideas and conceptions about, who we are as Native peoples. And we love to be able to set the record straight and share, the authentic realities of our peoples. But I think what's more important to me is that every visitor that leaves here has a sense of welcome that is similar to what you would find in our communities, in our traditional communities. They have a sense of welcome. They have a sense of belonging. They have something very personal, because we are values-based, in those core values. I think our visitors leave with a deeper understanding of, many cultures around the world have these notions or philosophies that we're all connected, leave the world a better place. I mean, you can just go on and on.
Yeah.
And that's really what matters. That's what connects us all. And so my hope and dream is that everybody comes here, and while they are looking at Native cultures, I hope they walk away with something very personal and meaningful that they can attribute to their own lives.
Yeah, very spiritual and meaningful. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Our guest tonight has been Shoshana Wasserman of First Americans Museum in Oklahoma City. Thank you for being our guest on Travelers Radio.
Well, thank you for having me. And in our language, we say thank you by saying Mado.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that's it for this edition of Travelers Radio. Now, this is Dan Schlossberg speaking also for the absent Roger Noriega, along with Arnell Kendall, saying thank you for your time this time until next time. Next week, same time, same place. We will find out what's going on in the San Francisco Peninsula. No joke. For now, good night and stay safe.